forcibly evicted from their homes in western Tigray by a brutal campaign of ethnic cleansing. There are currently over 1 million internally displaced persons sheltered in different locations throughout Tigray, with tens of thousands having fled to neighboring Sudan. November 4, 2020, the sound of gunshots and shelling would be heard around the borders of Tigray, particularly in western Tigray, where allied Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, along with their allies from Amhara region, commenced their invasion of Tigray. Following the occupation of these regions by Amhara forces, with the backing of Ethiopian and Eritrean national armies, western Tigray was illegally annexed by and incorporated into the Amhara region. By seizing and annexing a constitutionally recognized Tigrayan territory, the Amhara region, and by extension the Ethiopian government, have degraded constitutional foundation of Ethiopia's multinational federal political dispensation. Government-imposed complete communications blackout has made it difficult to grasp the full picture of what was happening in Tigray, despite the Ethiopian government's claim that the war on Tigray was a simple law and order operation. The fact of the matter is that it was a brutal war aimed at subjugating the people of Tigray or eliminating them.
99% ታርጌት መተናል 99% ኮላተራል ዳሜጅ አልነበረው የሚያጠራጥር ሲሆን አንተኩስም ለምሳሌ ማታ አልተኮስንም ህፃናት ቢሞቱስ ብለን የኛ ስለሆነ አንዲት ከተማ አንድ ሰው አልገደለም መከላከያ የማንም ሀገር ወታደር ቢሆን ከዚህ በለጠ ብቃት ማሳየት አይችልም በጣም ዲሲፕሊንድ ጀግና ወታደር ነው ያለው
The Prime Minister has told Parliament that the military did not kill a single civilian in this conflict. Really hard to believe. How can he be so sure of that?
Because he has a report on the ground. He's the Prime Minister of the country. The military strategy our defense forces drafted avoided any civilian casualty. The operation was led based on the principle of precision and surgical operation.
The armed men are wearing uniforms that match those used by the Ethiopian National Defence Force, or ENDF. On one of these men, we see an arm patch in the colours of the Ethiopian national flag. They're speaking Amharic, one of the official languages of Ethiopia.
But some here are angry, and a demonstration quickly grew around us. Ethiopia's Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, has removed the ruling party, the TPLF, from power in Tigray, but he hasn't won the people's hearts.
You want us to go to Chile?
Go to Chile, they said, and see what they have done to us. And as we left, they crossed their arms in a sign of defiance. Relatives of the dead were waiting for us under the branches of an acacia tree. Those unable or unwilling to flee were slaughtered by government troops, they said. Haile Selassie Kiros said his two brothers were shot.
For weeks, the river has been bringing with it dark secrets from the Ethiopian region of Tigray. Mangled corpses are mysteriously appearing here, downstream in Sudan.
They pulled the body out and the stench was immediate. It clearly had been decomposing along the river for a number of days, and he was tied back with a plastic wire, clearly restrained. And part of the skull was collapsed in. It's just a horrible, horrible sight.
These horrific massacres were preceded and later accompanied by dangerous rhetoric, including hate speech and dehumanizing discourse disseminated through state and local media against the people of Tigray, an act that clearly indicates that the atrocities committed on civilians were deliberate and systematic.
የተበላሸና ሳን ከባህር ማስወገጃ መንገዱ አንዱ ነው የባህር ውሃ ማስወገድ። ውድ ኢትዮጵያ ሕዝብ ወገናችን ሆይ ትግስት የወለደው ቁጭት ውጤቱ አመርቂ ነው አትጠራጠርም። ስለዚህ ሳናመነታም ሁላችንም በያለንበት በሚከተለው መሰረት እርምጃችንን እንድንጀምር ጥሪ እናስተላልፋለን።
እነዚህ ሰዎችና እነዚህን ሰዎች የመሰሉ ሰዎች እንዳይደገሙ ማድረግ ነው። እነሱ የመጨረሻ ሆነው እንዲቀሩ። ስለዚህ ሁሉ ጊዜም ቢሆን ለልጆቻችን ከዚህ በኋላ የክፉ ነገር ምሳሌ የማስፈራሪያ ማድረግ ያለብን እነሱን ነው። ከዚህ በፊት ልጆቻችንን እንዲህ ካደረክ ጭራቅ ይበላሃል ብለን ነበር የምናስፈራራቸው። አሁን የጭራቅ ዘመን ማለፍ አለበት። እነሱ ይበሉሃል ብለን ነው መናገር ያለብን። ማስፈራሪያ ነው መሆን ያለባቸው። ሰው እንዳይደግመው እንደነሱ አይነት ሰው ዳግም እንዳይፈጠር እዚች ሀገር እንዳይታሰብ ከመዋቅራዊ ቦታቸው ብቻ አይደለም ማስወገድ ያለብን፣ ከሰው ህሊና ከሰው ልቡና ውስጥ ከታሪክ መዝገብ ውስጥ ነው ተፈቀው መጥፋት ያለባቸው። ምናልባት ስለነሱ የሚያጠና ሰው ወደፊት መሬት ቆፍሮ ያግኝ እንጂ ምንም አይነት ነገር እንዳያገኝ ነው ማድረግ ያለበት።
እንደገና ዳግም ኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ በጥቂት ትግሬዎች የበላይነት እንዲገዛ ከዛም አልፎ ቤታችን እንዲፈርስ እንድንዋረድ ባሪያ እንድንሆን እንፈቅዳለን። ስለዚህ ምንድነው የሚያስፈልገው? ወኔ፣ ጽናት፣ ቁርጠኝነት፣ ድርጅት። ከዛ በኋላ ይሄን አውሬ መንጋ መደምሰስ ነው።
ይሄ ጠላት እስካልጠፋ ጊዜ ድረስ ከዚህ በኋላ ረፍት የለንም። ይህ ህዝብ የመላ ኢትዮጵያ ህዝብ ጠላት ነው። ይህ ህዝብ የኦሮሞ ጠላት ነው። ይህ ህዝብ የአፋሩ ጠላት ነው። የጋምቤላ ጠላት ነው። የሶማሌው ጠላት ነው። ስለሆነም በጀመርነው ልክ ይሄን ኃይል እጅግ በጀግንነት መንፈስ ልንፋለመው ይገባል ማለት ነው።
አምራችሁ ሌላ ምርጫ ስለሌለ ነው። አምራችሁ ያለ ምንም ርህራሄ ያለ ምንም አማራዊ ኢትዮጵያዊ ደግነት ከነሱ ጋር ሲመጣ ያለ ምንም መወላወል በሚያስፈልገው ማንኛው እውነቴን ነው የምናገረው፣ አረመኔያዊ በሆነ ጭካኔ ነው ልንጋፈጣቸው የሚገባው። አረመኔያዊ በሆነ ጭካኔ።
While most parts of Tigray had been freed by late June 2021, Western Tigray remained under the occupation of the Allied forces, where mainly Amhara forces that include Amhara militia, Amhara special police forces, and the vigilante group infamously known as Fanno have engaged in a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign against Tigrayans in Western Tigray.
They would say, "Yenyano, the land is ours, and you have to get out." They would ask for your ethnicity, and if you happen to be a Tigrayan, they would start treating you like you aren't a human being. Many children were killed in front of their parents. The atrocities committed in Western Tigray by Fanno are endless and full of cruelty.
The Dansha mayor, he kept telling us that we need to move, that we don't belong to stay here.
They took all my cattle, burned my sorghum in the house, and told us this is not our region. They said our land is east of the Tigray River.
They kept saying every night, "We will kill you. Go out of the area."
مدافع نربعة معلت مس وعلى لومي تطيبل صباح تطيبل تبلنا تطيبلا بدحريو سلمت مسبله سلمات مسكونا مدافع خطكوسي يقولون يوم بدحريو موليتي مسزابة مس أتمان مستنكر بعيدنا تدفعنا مس أكاتنا تدفعنا موت نستسوي حيزة لك مستوقع عزنا دخيماتني متعمي هم واقعا بكسنا أتاتا مسرو خفوئنا رئنا خباتاتا نخلو نرئ مالنا مرن زارا يرى بوم يا تولدي أنا على بوم همارا فيشنو
Have you listened? Kite Fatiru?
زم تاشم تتوخس جميرون نايلونا برخة كنا زينا
من يوم؟
ها؟
من يوم تتوخس جمر؟
زم فانز
The day we left home, Fano were shooting in our neighborhood. They came at night when we were all asleep. When they started shooting, my brothers and I woke up, but the shooting couldn't stop.
أنا نام شمي خمرة متعير مع عسر ثلاثة قدينا بوين ما نحوم كم تخيدم
My father is my brother. They go to bring my brother.
نحوي كم تخيدم أنا حوي حوي كتام تخيدس إلا ده طريقة بجزء قلف عشان نخيده تجزأنا شديد ومش فراسة تجزأنا أنا بتدهر تجزأ وتأمر كبر سنير تجبين مسر أنا بعاني زرع أخوة سميتو أموران دبل عري
شعو بلي فلتنا من قدي نحنا أبحرشان اللي هلنا معاتي وردنا أزو معات حرشان هلا أبزو حرشان هلنا بتانكديو بمدفعديو.
We were in the midst of our farming activities when all of this happened. They shelled and bombed our areas using tanks, artillery, and jets. There were people and animals when they dropped their bombs. So many animals died, and many little children were also victimized. We didn't even have the chance to bury the dead. They were eaten by dogs and vultures. Hyenas have never attacked people before, as we have spent our nights out in the open. They have made it taboo to bury the dead.
Amnesty compiled accounts from dozens of witnesses who fled into neighbouring Sudan, as well as telephone interviews with survivors in Aksum. 60,000 crossed the border after the Ethiopian government and the authorities in Tigray went to war last November. Allegations of atrocities and ethnic bloodletting were rife. And Sky News saw evidence of horrific injuries from refugees seeking sanctuary.
لا تقصوا ولا تقصوا برت لا تقصوا تجراوي سي كازيك لك لويلهم برت لا تقصوا يموت.
They were shooting when they arrived at our neighborhood. They were selectively shooting Tigrayans, saying the land doesn't belong to them and that they should leave the area.
أنا قلنا تمرتي قبل كقولت فلي بزترحونا يجزي مرة يحقس تهون نع أخبرك عزي جورة نجارة يلا
قبتان حيال تقسم بتعمين ناصنير
There was a heavy firing in Bakhar that I had to hide under a bridge for 9 days. Eritrean forces were firing from the west, while Abiy Ahmed's soldiers were firing from behind. Bakhar was on fire all day long from both sides for almost 10 days.
دخلنا برخة وحديرنا زينة.
I was on the road with 4 of my brothers and my friends, Philemon, Yared, Nahum, and we had to walk long distance on foot. I would sometimes rest on the way after having run a lot, but it really was tiring. People we run into on our way would give us some food, but I was hungry for most of the journey.
I remembered a day where 18 houses full of people were being burnt down in Bakhar by Fano. We all witnessed it because the church was built at the top of the mountain and the houses were down the valley of Bakhar. A pregnant woman was dragged out of the 18th house. Families tried to escape from the raging fire, engulfing their houses through any outlet they could find. In addition to committing large-scale massacres, Fano also looted houses, taking people's possessions with them, including cars and livestock.
Papers said Tigrayans need to leave the town immediately. They were thrown everywhere. So when we woke up in the morning, you should see it on your door or on the way to church. Everywhere.
The militia would even write on the houses that belong to Tigrayans, "This is ours. This is Amhara house." They told us not to speak in Tigrinya.
أوصل استوحى وقبلت قامت ناقن إسرائيل شو عتين تري مدهين علم مولي سم بومبا دوري مولنا كأبومبا بالدورينا تواقع أيده نجوه.
Then on February 4, they threw a bomb at us, and I was hit in the hand. They are the Fano. Then we started our journey to Maqadas Gondar, but what we witnessed on our way is unspeakable.
I get scared when I hear the sound of planes. My friends and I usually run into a hole and hide there when we hear any sound that sounds like that of planes. Then we get out right after the sound recedes.
We begin to piece together the puzzle. We are here in Sudan, in Wad al-Hilaw. Upstream in Ethiopia is Humera. Based on descriptions from multiple escaped detainees, Humera and its surroundings have become a mass detention facility. We were able to pinpoint the locations. Andaya Tabarak, a storage facility. The electric goods warehouse Naked and Mibrat Haili, where electric wire is stored. Bet Hinsat, the old prison. And Daguna, the sesame warehouse. The list goes on. Via eyewitness testimony and satellite imagery, we verified the existence of at least 7 mass detention facilities in Humera, where torture is rampant, and 2 outside town, including a military camp and the Hawaja. These are pictures of Tigrayan victims, husbands, fathers, sons. Many show victims restrained using the same small-gauge yellow electrical wire identified by eyewitnesses as having been stored in the electric goods warehouse in Humera. CNN spoke to multiple eyewitnesses and international and local forensic experts. Most of the victims were tortured, executed, piled on top of each other, most likely in a facility or a mass grave, before ending up in the river. After examining the bodies, experts were able to pinpoint one of the techniques used. Victims had their arms tied back at the elbows in an excruciatingly painful torture position. In the last few weeks, Tigrayans say the bodies of over 60 victims have floated into Sudan from Ethiopia. Evidence of a methodical campaign, one which bears all the hallmarks of genocide as defined by international law.
So what we describe in this report is an organised campaign of ethnic cleansing, which happened in several waves over the last 16 months, targeting Tigrayans in the western Tigray zone, which is now controlled by Amhara administrations and security forces. And what we found was a whole range of terror-inspiring tactics which were used, sexual violence, mass arbitrary arrests, and then forced expulsion of the Tigrayan communities.
What could cause this horrific ethnic cleansing campaign amounting to genocide? Let's go back in time to understand the full picture. Following the downfall of the military junta known as the Derg, there was a new beginning in Ethiopia, with the EPRDF coalition initiating the ratification of the 1995 constitution and the introduction of multinational federalism, which led to a new political and administrative structure.
Called for the transitional government. The PRDF didn't claim the transitional government for itself. There were about 85 members in the parliament, of whom only 30 were PRDF. The remaining belonged to other parties. So the transition period more or less went smoothly. We were able to craft one of the best constitutions in the continent, the federal constitution, that stands to be tested in history.
While the boundary readjustments based on ethno-linguistic criteria were accepted by many in Ethiopia, Amhara elites would be its most ardent detractors. In August 2015, a movement to incorporate Western Tigray into Amhara region would be led by the then-established Walqait Tsagade Amhara Identity Restoration Committee, working to include areas in Western Tigray known as Walqait, Tsagade, Tsalamti, and Kafta Humera into the region by all means necessary, including the use of force.
What they do is to pick a couple of maps that fits to them. They pick then the maps of the Haile Selassie period, but I think that is the worst map of all, because that is simply a map of, that Menelik and Haile Selassie, they have previously, Ethiopia was like a lot of kingdoms with hierarchy in it and so on, and you are having Tigray, you are having something in Gondar, you are having Kaffa. But when Menelik came, He participated somehow in the scramble for Africa. He gave part of the Tigrayan territory to the Italians, and then he has totally redrawn all boundaries in Ethiopia. If you look at that map, you see that the Gondar province at that time, 1/3 of the Gondar province, it was inhabited by Tigrinya speakers. The map that I have shown is a map of the languages of Ethiopia in 1975. And we try to organize a country based on the real world of the ethnicity and how the people interact. It makes sense to come to Tigray more or less with the boundaries like it was now.
The principal accusation made by Amhara elites against the PRDF that it carried out a demographic engineering in western Tigray deliberately glosses over empirical studies made on the ground from the 1984 national census conducted by the Derg, showing the region to have been populated overwhelmingly by Tigrinya-speaking people. Furthermore, the basic ethnic makeup of the region, as documented in the 2007 census conducted during the PRDF era, remains unaltered, debunking the myriad misleading claims made by Amhara elites.
The Ethiopian military, the previous regime of the Derg, had conducted census in 1984, European calendar. So we accessed to those resources, did our research, including books like Trimingham, Islam in Ethiopia, published in 1952. We looked into the map of Ethiopia languages. Here it is. I have a copy of the book. It clearly puts Walqait in Tigray, Tigrinya speaking, 1952. Dawit Yohannes, who was the vice commissioner of this commission, is an Amhara. You believe it in it.
A book by Donald Levine, Wax and Gold, Tradition and Innovation in Ethiopian Culture, published in 1972, shows a map of northern Ethiopia that clearly identifies Tigrinya-speaking areas in Ethiopia. The map showing Tigrinya-speaking people fits precisely with the current boundaries of Tigray.
And the map that I found another map already 1841 by a certain Mr. Weiland, and I don't know if you can see it clearly like that. You see the same contour more or less of Tigray like they write it, but look to my finger. It starts writing Tigray all across the Keze River. So not only the boundary is to both sides of the Keze River, but even the writing of Tigray is to both sides.
ሶስት ዓመተ ምህረት ነው ለዛ የገባሁትና እስከ 1965 ዓመተ ምህረት ድረስ እዛ የነበርኩት 15 ዓመት። በዛን ጊዜ ክልሉ የነበረው በአገር ግዛት ሚኒስቴር ትእዛዝ ከኔ በፊት በነበረው ግን በሉልጌታ አስተዳደር እኔም የማውቀው አልዋሃ ምላሽ ከወሎ ጠቅላይ ግዛት የትግራይ ነበረ። በጌምድር በኩል ያለው አዋሳኝ ደግሞ ወልቃይትን እና ጠገዴ በትግራይ አስተዳደር ሆነው የነበሩ ናቸው። እነዚህ ሁለቱ በአገር ግዛት ሚኒስቴር ትእዛዝ በ1948 ዓመተ ምህረትና በ1949 ዓመተ ምህረት ከወሎም ያው እስከ እንትን ድረስ ቆቦ ድረስ እንዲሆን በጌምድር የነበረው ደግሞ ተከዜ እንዲሆን የትግራይ ወሰን የሚል ትእዛዝ የወጣው ከሀገር ግዛት ሚኒስቴር በእነዚህ 2 ዓመተ ምህረት ነው። ከዛ በፊት የነበረው ግን በትግራይ መተዳደሩን በደንብ የሚያውቁ ሁሉም።
The accumulated historical and contemporary evidence clearly shows that the area known as Western Tigray has always been inhabited by an overwhelming majority of Tigrayans. And yet, making dishonest claims, Amhara forces have been waging a decades-long campaign to forcibly take control of this region from Tigray in clear violation of the Ethiopian constitution. In doing so, these forces have destroyed the basic framework of Ethiopia's constitutional system. While on the one hand claiming to be loyal to the constitution, the Ethiopian governments and its regional Amhara allies have degraded the very constitution that ushered in regional autonomy, rights of self-administration and self-determination, among others.
Ethiopian constitution doesn't allow for that historical claim. Yeah, because this is endless. Because you change. If I've seen these maps through time, every 50 years these borders were changing. Yeah, so what historical claim are you going to look at? What are you going to consider?
It is clearly indicated that most of the Tigrayans are wiped out of Maikadra and Western Tigray.
The worst ethnic cleansing, the most killings were in Western Tigray. Yeah, so that is, it's even a lot of that is uncovered. You have like 500,000 people who have been moved away from their house. So there are people from the, let me say, from the Abiy side or from the Fano side, almost snatching away Western Tigray. It is the main reason is to impoverish Tigray, to take away the most fertile lands. Let them go to their dry mountains. Yeah, and they will not survive in their dry mountains.
While Western Tigray was returned to Tigray following the post-1995 administrative restructuring, territories that used to be part of Tigray were also given to the Afar region, for instance. Similar stories can be told about other regions in the Federation. However, it is Amhara irredentism that has had a particularly pernicious effect on Ethiopia's stability and constitutional rule, with expansionist Amhara forces making territorial claims not just in Tigray, but also elsewhere, such as in Matakkal in Benishangul Gumuz and Kamise, Oromo-dominant special zone in Amhara region, areas where the outbreak of communal violence is a recurrent occurrence. In April 2022, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch issued a report which describes the systematic violations of international humanitarian and human rights laws committed mainly by Amhara forces against Tigrayans in Western Tigray. According to this joint report, these crimes amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity.
As abuses in Western Tigray continued, hundreds of thousands of Tigrayans were forced to flee their homes. Some fled to Sudan, while many more were forcibly displaced to other parts of Tigray in a brutal ethnic cleansing campaign.
The fate of the survivors of the atrocities still remains unclear, as they continue to suffer due to lack of basic humanitarian services such as food, water, and safe shelter they so deserve.
أنت مع أنتي نحنتي راشين 15 كيلو توهيبة كوا 20 حدي ناتنا مساعته يوها قاقيما.
During the first 6 months of my stay in Magala, I was only able to get food aid of 15 kilograms just only once. Then I got sheltered in this IDP camp on the 5th of September. Since then, I have been receiving insufficient amount of aid. We have no access to drinking water. Animals like hyena and security issues threaten our lives every day.
كفتنا حفصهم يوم وسيدهم
They took all our livestock in front of us. They looted our belongings and there was nothing we could do. We let them take everything. We are not receiving humanitarian aid due to the siege. Life is really difficult here, especially for parents, as we are not able to provide anything for our children.
We are living in these plastic tents, but we don't even have the simplest rug to lay ourselves on. We get 15 kilograms of wheat every 5 months, and as you can see, we are barely managing to stay alive.
These vicious atrocities have left enduring physical and psychological scars on survivors. Frustrated by the ongoing brutality against civilians and by international community's woefully inadequate response, survivors see a bleaker future ahead, unable to see light at the end of the tunnel.
I don't think the international community really feels the pain we had to go through and we are living in now. They have chosen silence, so I have nothing to say to the international community.
I
don't think the international community is giving enough attention to the crisis in Tigray. All they do is release statements of concern, which isn't obviously improving anything in our life. I believe this is because we are black.
I think the international community has denied us, the people of Tigray, the attention we deserve.
I miss our home in Ba'akhar. I miss my friends that remain there too. My mom is here with me, but my dad is in Addis Ababa and I haven't met him for so many days now. My dear father, how are you? All of our family here is fine. I hope you're doing okay.
Thus far, the international community has, by and large, stood idle as the invaders continue to inflict heinous atrocities against the people of Tigray. It has not only failed to hold the perpetrators of the atrocities accountable, but has also failed to even condemn these vicious acts of ethnic cleansing and genocidal massacres against the people of Tigray. It is time the international community went beyond statements of concern. It is time the international community lived up to its pledge of never again and began to protect the people of Tigray from a vicious, genocidal campaign.